Hello, everyone. Again, my name is Chris Barnes with Accellos, Accellos HighJump. I'm going to be emceeing the event. We ask that if you have any questions, I see we have some participants from past sessions as well. So you can chat the questions into the chat box, and we'll answer those at the end of the session. This is part 3 of the 4-part Optimize for Tomorrow webinar series. Part 4 is on August 27th, and it's return on investment for warehouse management systems. You can register for next week's session at accellos.com/optimize for tomorrow. The same way you were able to register for this event. You can also view the recordings from the previous 2 sessions while you're there. But now on to today's show, benefits of cloud WMS. As I mentioned, you can ask questions through the chat box, and we'll take a look at those at the end of the session. Jared Mendenhall is the manager and technical leader of the Cloud Services Department at HighJump Accellos and chief architect of the HighJump On-Demand Cloud Services Suite. Jared has worked across numerous cloud platforms, including Azure, AWS, Tier 3, and Rackspace, and has published articles related to cloud security in various publications, including 3PL Americas and Cool Runnings magazine. Before working as the head of the cloud services team, Jared designed and built the data center infrastructure, networking, and pre-cloud hosting operations for HighJump and Intelliton. With that, I hand it over to Jared, and you can run your seminar.
All right, Chris, thanks for the introduction. I appreciate it. So today we're going to discuss the significance of cloud computing and the associated cloud benefits for a WMS. If you look in the market today, we're kind of in the mid stages of an incredible shift happening in information technology, not dissimilar from other shifts in IT, such as the shift from mainframe computing to personal computers or from PCs to mobile devices. What we found, and I think what you'll find as well, is that there are numerous opportunities to improve the way that you do business through cloud computing. So with that, let's go ahead and take a look at the agenda. So first, we're going to start by jumping back 150 years and looking at another similar cloud-like transformation that occurred in business during that time frame, followed by formally defining what cloud computing is and discussing the just massive level of investments that is happening in the cloud marketplace today. After that, we'll take a look at a traditional on-premise IT environment and compare that to a cloud data center. And finally, we'll show you HighJump's Cloud WMS offering and talk through the solution that we've put together along with the key benefits for WMS. So with that, let's get to the next slide. So one of the many books written about cloud computing is one by Nicholas Carr, and it's called The Big Switch. And in his book, he draws an interesting parallel between cloud computing and another transformational shift that happened back in the late 1800s, early 1900s. In his book, he talked about the introduction of the Burden's wheel, which happened to be the most powerful vertical water wheel in history. Back in the 1800s, producing power for your own facilities and factories was a requirement and a cost of doing business. And with that, the more efficiently you could produce power, the more competitive you could be in the market. Henry Burden found a way to do just that with the wheel. In 1851, he constructed it to power his factory, and the invention of the wheel helped him become a market leader for several decades. However, by the 1920s, the Burden wheel was unused and rusting in a field. What happened? Did his company go out of business? No, there was actually a fundamental change in the way that businesses were accessing power. So in the early 1900s, late 1800s, early 1900s, a guy named George Westinghouse came along and invented, or I should say created, the first centralized power plant for mass consumption. As centralized power caught on, businesses no longer needed to invest large amounts of capital to build or buy their own dedicated power stations. Centralized power introduced a more efficient model, which ultimately changed the world. And yet, if you think about it, this leap for businesses at the time was, fairly risky. Businesses already had significant investments, and not just the wheels themselves, but also the different apparatuses to distribute the power, the proprietary equipment around that to make it work, and the staff to support that infrastructure. Now, obviously, companies did abandon the old model and made the change, and by the 1930s and 1940s, there was almost an entire shift to using centralized utility power. So then Carr points out in his book that a very similar shift is happening today in information technology with cloud computing. Both power and computing is considered a general purpose technology and can be centralized more efficiently and offered at a lower cost than a distributed model. Using centralized technology in turn frees up enormous amounts of time and capital for business owners to invest into their core business. Back then it was power, and today it's computing. So just to give you a couple of examples of waste in a distributed model as it relates to IT, several studies have shown that with in-house server systems, it's estimated that 70% of IT labor costs are driven purely by routine maintenance activities. So that's a lot of time that's being taken away from the business that could be focused on your core competencies instead. And another recent study by HP found that only 20% of corporate servers are utilized, and only 35% of their network storage capacity is consumed. Again, a lot of upfront investment with very little usage behind it. So now let's go ahead and define what cloud computing is. So leaning on Carr's example, cloud computing is essentially the compute equivalent of a utility company. But instead of providing service over a power line, they're providing service over an internet connection. And of course, the other difference being that you can choose to provide your compute power, whereas with a true utility company, well, you're kind of stuck. And also, as we'll dig into a bit later, many software vendors, including ourselves, are building our software on top of these cloud compute environments for our customers to use. So looking at the drive towards cloud computing, I wanted to just give you a couple examples of just the sheer level of investment going on that has gone on and is continuing to go on right now in the cloud market space. Looking at Gartner's study at the top, over $500 billion has been spent through 2013 and will be spent through 2016. And if you think about that, I mean, beyond the just magnitude of that amount of cash flow going into this market, that's already on top of the hundreds of billions of dollars invested to run services that we currently have, like Office 365, Skype, Salesforce, and the other millions of services that are out there today. I also added a screenshot here that just kind of shows you, some of the different guys out there like Google, Microsoft, and Facebook. And these are actually pointing out the new data centers that they're turning up, which, as you can see, is all over the world. So now let's do a quick comparison between a on-premise IT environment and with a cloud environment. For starters, there's a significant upfront investment required to build an on-premise environment. Purchase decisions have to be made in terms of what servers do you need to buy, how much CPU and memory and disk is needed on each of them, what networking devices is needed to connect everything together, which software programs are required, which virtualization and backup software programs do you need, and who's going to build and maintain it all. And then on top of that, you've got ongoing headaches you need to deal with, like security. How many people out there have trash cans keeping the server room door open because it gets too hot? Quite a few. What happens if somebody breaks into your server room or breaks in through your network and is able to steal information? Are your backups still running? Are your backups being taken off-site in case something happens to your location? Who's maintaining all of this? And what happens if these critical components fail? So there's a lot of things you've got to think about when you've got your critical infrastructure on site. And very few of them are likely part of a business's core competency. So as for the cloud infrastructure, your critical services when you use a cloud provider are in one of these. Hey, can you guys still hear me okay? My audio dropped out for a second.
Yeah, I think we lost you for just a few seconds.
Okay, sorry about that. So as for cloud infrastructure, your critical services are located in one of these incredibly robust facilities designed by a cloud provider. Cloud providers also host their own services within these clouds. So for instance, if you're running your programs on something like AWS, which is Amazon's cloud environment, it's the same infrastructure running their product like Amazon.com and other big businesses like Netflix. Or with Microsoft, their cloud is hosting their own products like Office 365 and Skype and Bing. And that's in addition to the many other thousands of customers that are running on their platform. So as you can imagine, they're highly incentivized and they will do everything possible to make sure that their cloud services are as robust, available, and secured as possible. So walking down the list here, looking at security, each of the data centers hosted by top-tier cloud providers are locked down with multiple layers of physical security. That can mean everything from perimeter gates, multiple locked entries, and multi-factor authentication mechanisms like badge readers, key code locks, biometric scanners, etc. Also, they have cameras sitting at every point of entry and exit, and security personnel who are on site 24/7. And then as far as logical security, cloud providers also invest in the best network firewalling solutions available and have threat assessment systems in place to identify and shut down attacks. In terms of resiliency, as you can also imagine, each of the facilities for cloud providers is designed to be fully redundant. For instance, power is distributed through multiple channels within the facility. Each of the pieces of equipment typically has at least 2 connections, power connections, and each of those connections takes completely different paths out of the facility. Sitting upstream from those, they've got battery protection in case there's a power failure, as well as diesel generators, that can be fed fuel and keep a facility up indefinitely. And all of this is regularly tested and maintained. Network connectivity is another huge one. If you think about it, the network connection for a cloud is the lifeblood of the cloud. If their connection's down, then you obviously can't get to their services. Therefore, it's like cutting the power line. So same type of thing. They're very diligent about making sure they've got multiple carriers pulled into these facilities, multiple connections, and I've seen it where in most cases they end up pulling connections into different ends of the building, which take different paths once they leave the building, so that way, if there's a construction project or something going on outside, somebody's not going to cut a line and take down the facility. As far as servers and storage, typically they use some type of low-level virtualization tech. For instance, Microsoft Azure uses a custom version of their Microsoft hypervisor. And that ensures that if any piece of hardware fails within the data center, there is little to no disruption in services. Data is replicated automatically within the location, and cloud providers usually have a method to also replicate both data and servers between multiple regions. So that means you can, your data is automatically backed up and replicated within a facility, and you can move it back and forth to other locations. We actually use US East and US West, so we've got a lot of fault tolerance there. Even if the entire eastern seaboard is down, we still have our data in another location. So pretty cool stuff. As far as the management, cloud providers enlist, as you can imagine, the cream of the crop in terms of IT professionals who live and breathe this stuff. They have a dedicated network team, a dedicated server team, a dedicated virtualization team. I think you get the idea. And they invest also in the best tools and systems for their staff to use to keep things updated and monitored. And finally, the big cloud providers are regularly audited by industry-certified third parties that ensure that they are following best practices. So I think that gives you an idea, comparing and contrasting an on-premise environment with what a cloud provider is doing. It's pretty amazing. And actually, one of my favorite examples of an investment made by cloud providers, if you look at the bottom right here, I've got a picture and it looks like some shipping containers. Well, those are actually shipping containers, but they're filled with computers. So Microsoft has actually built these custom self-contained compute units in a shipping container that has like something north of 2,000 computers built in. And if they need to add extra capacity to the data center, they just bring in another shipping container, snap it in, and off they go. Pretty amazing stuff, and also it helps them save power and cooling. So one last key note here before I move to the next slide. Even if you are using a cloud environment, there's obviously some requirements to have equipment on site, but it's a lot different than if you've got your critical services there. Maintaining a couple switches and some Wi-Fi for your laptops and desktops and your internet connection is a lot easier than having to deal with critical components where you're, again, having to worry about backups and failover and redundancy and virtualization and all of the other software that goes with that. So now let's segue into Accellos HighJump's Cloud WMS offering. Just a little bit of background here on us. Accellos HighJump, we've actually been in the hosting cloud services business for several years now, so this is not something new to us. And prior to the advent of cloud computing, we actually ran numerous customers in a data center that we had built. Now, obviously, today we've migrated all of that up to Microsoft Azure, which is our cloud provider. They are a top-tier provider, and we've been extremely satisfied with them so far. But it wasn't a decision that we came to lightly. In fact, we went through and evaluated 7 different cloud and more traditional hosting providers before deciding that Azure was the right fit. If you're interested in more information about why we picked Azure or how we're using it today, let us know, and we'd be happy to send you more information and jump on a call if you would like. So with that, as I said, we've built our Cloud WMS platform in Azure. It takes advantage of the new technologies that the cloud offers. I mentioned that we could do failover between US East and US West in the event of a disaster. There's several other key advantages and things that we're taking advantage of that the cloud gives us. Everything from load balancing to the additional security mechanisms that they're providing us. So what does our offering include? Obviously it includes the latest in terms of their compute storage and networking infrastructure. It includes performance tuning. It includes the backups, the monitoring, the regular OS patching, and then 24/7 support provided by us. We're also using the latest tools on the backside for monitoring, management, and automation. And to give you a good example of what we're able to do with that, we've got automation scripts that can build a new cloud environment when we sign up a new customer within a few minutes versus having to spend a few hours up to a couple days for an on-premise install. But I think if you wanted to boil all of this down into a single statement, the real key advantage here for you guys is that we take care of your WMS. It's on our platform. It's our software. So if there's a problem with it, you come to us and we make sure it's taken care of. So one last thing, we've split our cloud offering actually into 2 offerings. We've got our public WMS and our private WMS. So let me highlight the differences real quickly for you here. So the public cloud takes advantage of the multi-tenant capabilities of our application. So it is a shared platform. We include the software, hosting, support, and upgrades is all bundled into one flat monthly payment, which means there's no upfront investment in terms of the software licensing that you need. And it's typically suitable for smaller customers, 1 to 30 users, and customers that don't need code-level customizations. We do support what we call tailoring. We have some documentation around that, so we actually do support quite a few customizations, but we don't support the true code-level customizations. With private cloud, it is a completely dedicated environment for a single customer, and it's sold much the same way that we do an on-premise deal today, where the software is sold upfront as a perpetual license and is not included in the monthly fee. And we package the software exactly the same way we do on-premise deals, which is our collect, manage, and fulfill. Some advantages here, it does allow you to customize the WMS software at a code level. It can support customers who are larger in size, so you can be over 30 users, but we can also support smaller customers. And it also supports some more of the enterprise grade shipping that we have. So kind of jumping back here, just one more time, let's go through the benefits of the cloud for a WMS. Main strategic benefit here, it allows you to focus on your business, not your IT systems. It allows us to manage your WMS, which is a core competency for us. We've written the software, right? It allows you to replace large capital expenditures with a flat monthly fee. You're not having to buy all of this stuff to install and manage on site. We're leveraging Microsoft Azure, which is truly a world-class infrastructure, and allows us to provide all of these benefits to you in terms of availability, security, and scalability. And there's a lower, more predictable cost of ownership. And as far as, again, we manage it for you 24/7 by 365. We're the single point of accountability for you. We can rapidly deploy the solution for you when customers sign up, and we can scale up and down the resources as needed. And finally, we offer, as we just looked at, 2 different flavors so we can best fit a cloud solution to your needs. So with that, before I open it up, Chris, there's usually a couple of commonly asked questions. I wanted to go ahead and address those really quickly, and then I'll open it up to you here. So first question, how do I ensure my connection stays up so I can access services? So obviously, when you're using a cloud service, your internet connection is more important. That is how you're getting to the service. And what we're doing with a lot of our customers is actually adding multiple connections. So we'll recommend pulling in somebody like a Comcast, which is a cable modem, and a DSL provider, or a T1, or some of our customers have even chosen to use as a tertiary 4G, which is a wireless technology. So that gives you the multiple failover that you need for a connection. And also we're finding that a lot of these providers, because of this drive to cloud computing, are aggressively pushing out services to more and more locations. So that's a great thing too. In terms of bandwidth, our application is actually pretty skinny. I think we recommend like 50K per user, which is very, very small. So we don't use a lot of bandwidth. And in terms of security, how do I know my data is secure in the cloud? Obviously, we've done a lot of work on the backside to make sure that your data is locked just to you so that nobody else can access it. And Microsoft Azure also has a hard drive destruction policy. So any data leaving any of the data centers is destroyed before it's thrown into the trash. So with that, I think, Chris, I'm done. If you want to go ahead and open it up for questions.
Yeah, you can, as I mentioned, you can type questions in through the chat box. I had a couple come in through the good discussion, so thank you, Jared, for enlightening us more on the cloud and why the WMS users should be considering that market. Let me look here. Some of these are related, obviously, more to things that happen in my house. I've got a young daughter that consumes a lot of bandwidth. What happens if someone in the office is downloading lots of videos or doing something else that might slow down the connectivity or the bandwidth?
Yeah, sure. So that's a great question. It's actually really easy to fix. There's most, if not all, of the devices you connect to the internet with. It's typically called a firewall. You can actually dedicate bandwidth to certain types of traffic. So what we typically recommend is, okay, we've got this many users. Therefore we need this much bandwidth just for the Accellos HighJump solution. You can then go into the device and very easily configure that. So that way, even if somebody's doing other things, downloading files or watching videos, it's not impacting the dedicated bandwidth you have available for the cloud.
Okay, good. Well, as I said, I know my daughter consumes a lot of bandwidth, so it should probably be a question for people with warehouses too. Here's another one about security, and I have actually never really thought about this. What does the cloud provider, or I don't know if it's us or Azure, but what do they do with the data when the hard drives are thrown out or dispositioned? Yeah,
so part of the industry auditing that I mentioned earlier, part of the standard is that they have a data destruction policy. So, and they're regularly audited to make sure that this happens. Anytime they're taking hard drives or anything else that's storing data out of the data center, and either they wouldn't be sending it somewhere else, but if they're destroying it, like taking it to the dump, for instance, or sending it to a hardware disposal facility, they make sure that the data is wiped completely off. So that's the way they guarantee that none of the data gets outside of the data centers.
Okay. And here's one that's it's more of a costing or a cost benefit perspective. I think they're asking in general, what's the cost or the investment benefits of going cloud versus on-premise? I can address that from a sales standpoint. Typically, you have to look at it from where the money is coming from. It's either a capital expenditure or it can be an operating expense. So a lot of managers are looking to change how their IT projects are being funded. From my experience, customers looking at cloud are typically looking at a 3-year kind of a differential period. So if you look at the cost of cloud versus on-premise over 3 years, on-premise may start paying for itself better, but it's just a matter of what your IT strategy is going to be and who's going to be funding the projects. Jared, I don't know if you have any input there or not, but that's kind of what I'm seeing.
Yeah, no, that makes complete sense. I think what a lot of the IT managers are doing these days is, hey, okay, so my renewal is coming up for my hardware where I need to pay a bunch of money to renew my warranty with Dell or somebody. Well, should I instead take that money and start moving things into the cloud? And I think that's what's happening today. Gartner actually had another statistic that showed that I think 80% of future IT budget is allocated to cloud versus 20% to on-premise. So it's a process. People are, as things are coming up, as things are failing, moving things up to the cloud.
Okay. And let's just take one more. It's kind of a nebulous cloud question, if that makes sense. How has your experiences with the cloud been so far? I mean, just from what you're seeing with our customer base.
Experience has actually been really good. Like I said earlier, we've moved a lot of our services that were in a traditional data center. We've moved them up to the cloud. All of the feedback we've gotten so far has been great. We're getting a lot better performance from each of our virtual machines because we're running on newer, the newest, latest, greatest stuff up in the cloud. The other cool thing about the cloud is that there's no technical bandwidth limit. So if you provision a data center, you're kind of stuck with whatever pipe that you've paid for. Whereas because the cloud scales dynamically, you use as much bandwidth as you need. So those two things alone have been extremely promising. But to really answer your question, yeah, we've had a great experience with it.
Okay, good. I guess we would expect nothing less. I think it's the future of computing. So I'm going to wrap it up with that. If you have any more questions, feel free to reach out to us directly, Nick or Jared, or myself, Chris Barnes. But we're going to wrap up this session here. Part 4 is return on investment for WMS. That is next Wednesday, same time. And you can register at accellos.com/optimize for tomorrow. Thank you for attending.
Thanks, Chris.